Hey, welcome to episode 5 of Jesus, His Words and the Generative Way. In these short videos, I'm attempting to look at the words of Jesus as recorded in the Bible and to find some meaning for our everyday life. I'm back in my little home office here after spending some time with my daughter and her husband, my grandson, and I sit here with a magnificent view of the Indian Ocean. And every now and again, out the corner of my eye, there's been some whales, probably 3, maybe 4 whales that are out the front here, and I may be distracted when I see something like that, so please forgive me. Anyway, what are we talking about today? Today we want to talk about living a different way of life. He kind of summarizes all of this by inviting us to be salt and light. What does it mean by salt and light? Well, we know that salt adds flavor to food, and light helps us to see, helps us to get clarity, to live bright lives. And then he goes on in Matthew chapter 15, and he goes in verse 17, he says these words. He says, "Now that I've put you there on a hilltop, on a light stand, shine. Keep open house. Be generous with your lives. By opening up to others, you'll prompt people to open up to God, this generous Father in heaven." I love these words. There's so much of what Jesus is saying is inviting us to live a different way of living. And he kind of gives us 2 clues here what that looks like. The first thing he speaks about is to keep open house. When I grew up, there was this house in the neighborhood, kind of an open house. The family there were very generous. They allowed people to come and go. We had coffee, we'd hang out, listen to music, play music. It really was a wonderful place for kids to hang out. The parents were anonymously present. If things got out of hand, they would kind of make an appearance and bring things back into some sort of order. But for the most part, it was a place where we found acceptance, friendships, commonality amongst people like ourselves as teens. And I think when Jesus says keep open house, he's speaking about having that way of life, a way of life that is generous, a way of life that is different. And I think about Jesus' life, there are a couple of things that help us to understand what it means to live open house. The first thing is that Jesus was transparent. He simply was who he claimed to be. Now, of course, he claimed to be God, which ultimately got him killed. In a world today, we have these alter egos, don't we? We want to represent ourselves on social media as this wonderful person who's got our life together. Sometimes we want to represent ourselves as victims. But nevertheless, there's this desire to be transparent, to be open, to be found out for who we really are. There's great freedom in being transparent, in being who you claim to be. The second thing is that Jesus was compassionate. He moved with I just saw a whale. Excuse me, but I know it's very distracting. But anyway, this is what it means to live open house. He never judged people. The only thing that he judged was religion, which alienated people from God. But for the way people lived, the Bible says his reputation was that he kept company with publicans, which were essentially bar owners and sinners. Those were the people who he had a reputation of hanging out with. He had this vulnerability. He had this openness towards everybody. People who were untouchable, lepers, he touched them. People who were unacceptable, women caught in the act of adultery, he was compassionate towards them. Jesus was filled with transparency, with compassion, with vulnerability. He was honest and truthful. Jesus was courageous. These are the qualities that cause us to live as lives of open house. Such great aspirational ways of living. The second thing was that Jesus was generous. He speaks about being generous, and generosity is not just about giving money, which it is, or material things, but it's around being generous in the way that we view other people. So often, especially Christians, they see people that aren't conformed to a certain kind of inside language, a different way of embracing life and having a different value system to everybody else. In essence, what they do is they just become judgmental and they begin to shun others. Whereas what Jesus is saying in being generous is to be accepting. It doesn't mean that we have to approve everything that everybody does. It doesn't mean that we have to like what they do. It simply means that we accept that these are who they are and that we want to have an open heart towards them. We want to be generous towards them. The greatest meaning for me when I think of being generous is being graceful. In other words, giving grace to people, giving people plenty of space to express themselves and to live their lives. Jesus says if we do these 2 things, our light will shine. Perhaps people will be influenced by the way we're living this life, by the way our non-judgmental, courageous, vulnerable, compassionate life. Maybe people begin to inquire about God themselves. You know, I've never met a Christian who became a Christian because they lost an argument about the existence of God, the existence of man, the reality of the Bible, all those things that we call apologetics that people argue about. Most people come to faith in Jesus because they figure out who He is. This is a faith journey. It's not clear and absolute and clinical, but there's so much life and spirituality in all of this. And Jesus invites us to live that life with Him. If you've never lived that life with Jesus, maybe you want to do that. Maybe you want to open your heart. Forget about the religious side of things for a moment. Just open your heart and say, Jesus, if you're there, if you're real, come into my life, and see what happens as you begin to figure out a journey of faith. If you've prayed that kind of prayer and you've decided to open your heart to Jesus, DM me and let's see how we can journey in this place together. Thanks for watching this video. May God bless you. May you live an open house kind of life. God bless.